My background is in systematic theology. I've done church work for over 30 years. And among all the topics that I could have chosen, this was not on the list. This was not what I wanted to give a talk about among all the things that I could do. So why are Kerry and I here? Why are we here? Well, this topic found us. We didn't find it. We weren't seeking a new area of ministry to focus on. It was our goal and my passion and my sense of mission as a layperson and as a theologian to help Catholics discover the treasures of their faith, to understand it more profoundly, to appreciate the beauty, the glory of it more deeply, and to live it more effectively. Truth and beauty and goodness. This is what I was all about. But then that oldest child of ours, after complaining and hemming and hawing and identifying the reality that she was the only kid in her 8th grade class that did not have a phone. Well, this is back in 2011 and 2012. An 8th grader without a phone in a Catholic school, God forbid. Right, this is 10 years ago. 8th grader. And so we finally relented. We relented. We had done such a good job up to that point. And we got her a phone. Nice and locked down, but we got her a phone. And come to find out that even texting can be a problem. Even though it was locked down, even though we had protections in our home, and you can hear all about that stuff, I stumbled upon, a few months later, a group text that she was a part of, not really participating much in, but she was a part of. And I decided to print out this group text that she had with about 7 or 8 of her Catholic school classmates. Good kids coming from good Catholic homes. I printed out the 137 pages of the text chat and went through it and to discover that these kids were texting each other, not my daughter. Again, she was only in the group, so she would get all of these messages, all hours of the night, discussing their involvement in this website I'd never heard of. I'm like, what is this site? And how are these kids on it for hours? I'm not even going to say the name of it because I don't want you going there. Went on the site, and it's this site that links together spontaneously and seemingly without any kind of measure, 2 different video pictures where you can be seen and heard, and you see and hear someone else's video feed. I was not aware of this, and I went on it, and there's a reason why this is not for kids. This thing, because when I went on it, about 1 out of every 5 pictures that I would be randomly connected to were groups of young teenage girls. Just kind of giggling and looking. About 1 out of every 5. The only thing that was more common than that, and please, I don't mean to shock anyone, was a man masturbating. That was the most common thing that would show up as I would click on it. I was shocked. And then I would quickly get off of this one, and then there was another one. It was horrific. How does this happen? And then I noticed that there were other buttons on this site, and when I would click on one, there was just adults, click here, and I'm like, what is this? I clicked on it, and there was no entry point, any kind of barrier to entry. And it brought me to a page of live sex channels. I quickly got off it, and I went to my daughter. I said to her, have you ever been on the site? She turned pale white. Never in my house. Never here at home. Only 4 times. When did that happen? Sleepover, sleepover, sleepover. And that other time that I was at a party and you drove me home before the rest of the kids slept over. Good Catholic families, good Catholic homes, didn't have a clue. Why am I here doing this talk? Why are we here and so passionate about this? Because even good Catholic families and good Catholic homes don't have a clue what their kids are exposed to in the digital world. That was 10 years ago. Now, I haven't been to that site in 10 years, and I thought, does this site still exist? I went back to prepare for the talk. I just went back and kind of prepared myself. Oh yeah, it's still there. But now they have personalized buttons, gay sex, girl sex. It is just, I almost threw up. It was so disgusting. I told Carrie, I'm like, this is so disturbing. This is so disturbing. So I went to the parents. And there's 100 stories to tell among this. And you know all the parents said, not my daughter, not my kid. I don't know what you're talking about. Or it was, kids will be kids. Kids will be kids. And I'm thinking, who are you? What are you doing? Let's just say, in the last 10 years, do you think things have gotten better or worse? So we have given this series over the course of the last 10 years, having given it in a couple of years since COVID, and to research again and update the statistics, it is so sad. Things have gotten so much worse. So today we're going to explore this. Who's happy they're here now? Right? Yay, what a happy topic to discuss. But I'm only here because it's desperately needed. And who's talking about it? Who's exploring it beyond the statistics? Oh, we all know internet pornography is horrible, and we all know what's out there, and we all know there's terrible things on the internet. No, you got to do better. We have to do more. And we have to do more together. I'll tell it to you now. I'm going to give you the solution. If you can't be here for the whole thing, the solution to parenting kids in the digital world is a community of families who make a commitment to walk together with similar ideals. No matter how much you do in your home and in your kids' lives to put protected devices and to lock down the internet in a safe way in your home, no matter how much you do in your home and in your kid's life, all of that goes out the window if they have one friend who has unmonitored, unfiltered access to the internet. We will survive and overcome this together, or our kids will be taken out one at a time. I don't normally talk like this. This isn't what I like to talk about. But there are reasons why you're here too. And so I know that you come with some very practical considerations. People want to know, what phone should I do for my kids? When should I give it to them? What should we be aware of? What should we be prepared for? We're going to cover those things. We're going to cover it in a very systematic way. But the deepest reason why we're here is that if you're a parent, you're called to lead and provide, protect your family. Lead and provide and protect your family. That is the stewardship. Because the kids that you have in your home are not your kids first, they're God's kids, put into your hands. And one of the biggest areas where we need to step up our game, if we are going to fulfill our call before God, is with regards to the digital world. Okay, how are we going to do this? I'm going to cover 5 topics: awareness, protection, influence, freedom, and engagement. And in those topics, we're going to cover, how do we see the internet and these connected devices? How do we see ourselves? We'll cover a number of themes around awareness. Then we'll talk about protection, and yes, we're going to get into the technology level of things. We are going to cover that, but that's not going to be the principal activity of these sessions. I can point you to simple searches to give you access to answers around, how does this particular phone get locked down better? How about this software versus this software? Those are things that I'm going to leave in your hands. Influence, we're going to see how the digital world interacts with the real world. There's a mutual influence that happens there. Let's explore that. and the addictive impact that the digital world has on the real world. Then we're going to dig into the Catholic theology of freedom. This is so important in parenting. You see, these talks that I give are not just going to be about your smartphone is bad. No, it's going to be about parenting. We're going to dig into the realities of parenting. And in particular, we understand how freedom develops in an individual in accord with our tradition. And let's see how that can play out with regards to connected devices to the digital world. And then lastly, it's all about engaging. It's not going to be a matter of get all the information and then don't take action. We're going to talk about engaging. I'm going to bet some of you here will come away from this saying to yourself, oh no, what have I done? And now what do I do? So we're going to talk about the difference between initiating, shepherding our kids into the navigating of these challenging realities versus intervention. I've got to disrupt what's been happening. I need to take a new course. So we're going to talk about that. Okay? So that's where we're headed. Let's start with awareness. So awareness is critical in parenting the digital generation. And I'm going to talk about it in 5 different ways. First of all, awareness as a source of renewal for your family life. Last night I gave a whole talk on that. We're not going to go through the whole talk. I'm going to highlight just a couple of quick themes. Second is awareness of the digital world and of connected devices. Then we'll talk about awareness of your child. Know your children, knowing them. Then we'll talk about having an awareness of the tween years in child's development, and then awareness of your own self as a parent. All of this is going to come to bear on how you help your kids navigate the digital world. Man, this is exhausting. This is topic number 1. Okay? Flee the building now. Once you're here, you'll be held accountable. I'm going to tell you, there is a second answer to dealing with the digital world. It's called the Northwest Territory. It's not yet connected. You can just live in the Northwest Territory. That was a joke. He's like, is he serious? If there's enough of us, I'm going. Okay? All right. So let's talk about awareness. Today on this beautiful feast day, St. John Paul II, on awareness as a source of renewal. Those of you who were here last night heard St. John Paul II, Archbishop of Krakow, Second Vatican Council. He comes out with all this amazing teaching, but teaching has to take flesh in life. How does teaching take flesh in life? He wrote a book on it, Sources of Renewal. This teaching of the church is meant to come alive in our midst, in our diocese. How do we do that? His focus was, if you want to be renewed in faith, don't focus first on actions. Focus first on awareness, how I see something. He called it consciousness, because truth is inserted into consciousness. What a great idea. Some of the big words here, phenomenology, metaphysics, right? The truths of our faith, revealed truth, was made for our minds. The mind was made to come into cognitive contact with reality through experience. I did that for you, Father. Okay, I did my doctoral dissertation on John Paul II. So our minds are made to absorb the idea, the identity, the essence of things. They become implanted into consciousness so that we see things in a certain way. And that's a source of renewal, John Paul II says. For how we see shapes our attitude, how we relate. And how we relate will show up in how we behave. Awareness, attitude, action. This is huge in parenting. In parenting, we often focus on actions and behaviors. Not a bad thing. Stop doing this, stop doing this. John Paul II says, actions aren't just actions. Actions display attitudes. I got 5 teenagers. I see attitudes all the time in their actions. But attitudes aren't just attitudes. Attitudes are traced back to awareness. How I see shapes how I relate, which shows up in how I behave. So what we want to do today is develop a way of seeing the internet. How do we see the digital world and connected devices? How do we see it? So Carrie there is using a camera. Now she's using my smartphone. What is a smartphone? I'm going to give you a different way of seeing a smartphone to help shape your own attitude and behavior when it comes to, when should my kid get a phone? That's often the bottom line question. What about car keys? When do you give your kids car keys? Would you just go, 5th grade, there you go. Oh, it's a joke, right? But a joke, you'd never do that. Has to be the right time, age appropriate. It has to be driver's ed. You got to study. You got to practice accompaniment. You got to pass the test to prove yourself. You got to know, obey the rules of the road or face the fines. You got to know your car, where things are, and how it works. When do you give a kid when you give your kid a smartphone, you're giving them car keys. Would that change your idea regarding when you give them a smartphone? If in fact you really believed, if you had that awareness, that sense, that when I gave them a smartphone, I was giving them car keys. Another one that you can use is a swimming pool. When do you allow your kid to jump in the pool? You never leave them unattended. They don't know how to swim unless you teach them. Unless they can swim, they use a life vest. You accompany them in the water. They take lessons. They practice. They progress from the shallow into the deep end. What about the internet? Every connected device is a swimming pool. Do you leave them unaccompanied? Do you leave them unmonitored? Do you walk with them to make sure that they're safe in knowing how to be in that pool? How we see is going to shape how we relate to it. There's implications for our parenting. A new awareness about the digital world, this world of smartphones and connected devices, is going to lead to new attitudes and new actions. Now, growing in this awareness that I'm just sharing with you, it's a process. It's right now just information. I'm just giving you lots of information. My goal is that information will lead to insight. Insight, I'm going to see into my own life and my own parenting, but eventually they'll become the way I see. It's going to be the natural way that I'm conscious of this technology in my home, and it's something that I'm going to pass on to my kids. I'm going to talk to my kids based on this. My son turned 17, John Mark, 2 weeks ago. Do you know when he got his first phone? Last week. Say it out loud. A 17-year-old young man in 2022 has never had a smartphone, ever. And the phone he has now, I'm going to tell you about it because I'm going to recommend it. It's not an iPhone. It's not a typical phone that has access to social media platforms and all these other things. It's beautifully and appropriately locked down, and it allows for kids to grow in their own use of a phone. Before that, he had an iPod Touch. It was locked down. Couldn't access the internet unless it was on Wi-Fi, didn't have a browser. You can do this. Kids don't have to have phones. We think they do because they all do. I hear this from the 4th grade parents. There's so much that we think our kids need that they don't need, and they don't need it and won't need it if they have friends that don't have it and don't use it. This is a community answer, brothers and sisters. It is a community answer. That's why we have to share this awareness with others. Okay, how do we grow this awareness about our own children? This is another part. How you see your child. Your child's a gift from God. Your child's deepest identity is going to be revealed to you by God. That's who your child really is. But there are other human sources of insight into your children that can aid you in your parenting. I'm going to share with you some that have benefited Carrie and me. Why? Not every child's the same. You think about being drawn towards social media platforms, being drawn towards gaming, being drawn towards pornography. Not all kids are going to have the same propensity or inclination. A lot of this is tendencies and personality traits and other types of ways that they've been formed. These are things that will be unique to the child that is yours and the children that are yours. Our kids are so different. And we have to be so much more attentive to some rather than others regarding particular challenges on the internet. So knowing your children, so important. Where do we use MBTI, Myers-Briggs? So much fun, so interesting to have the kids take their tests. The thrill seeker is very different than the performer, right? So it's these 4 sets, the introvert versus the extrovert, the intuitive versus the sensitive, the thinker and the feeler, the judger, the perceiver, and then how they all blend together. So interesting. Kids will find valuable insight, not total insight. No, that's revealed by God. But you can get helpful insight regarding the kids that will be drawn towards certain things on the internet. The second one that we found very helpful are the 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. It was in a book that she first wrote called The Happiness Project. Better Than Before. And then she wrote a second book on just the 4 tendencies. Very interesting. 4 tendencies are the upholder, the obliger, the questioner, and the rebel. And it's related to expectations. When do you take action? When expectations come from outside of you, respond to them versus inside of you. And so basically it's a Johari window of the combination of the two. So upholders will respond both to expectations coming from the outside as well as from the inside. Rebels will say no to expectations coming from the outside and the inside. I am making any young man that wants to marry one of my daughters take this test. It is so helpful in marriage. The obliger married the questioner. What an interesting thing to learn about the insights and the dynamics that happen based on your tendencies. Another very helpful one is 5 Love Languages. Gary Chapman, you're familiar with those. I'm sure you all are. And the last one's the Enneagram, not the old version of the Enneagram that's related to sort of new age sources and that sort of thing. Industrial, organizational psychiatrists, psychologists have taken this and taken the 9 personality types and brought out some very interesting insights. So if you're going to dig into the Enneagram, which can be super interesting, make sure that the sources they're coming from are not drawn from new age foundations. Because that then gets into weirdness that you just want to avoid. Draw out the insight that's there, purify it, elevate it, use it. Don't use it if it's something that will disturb you. What about the awareness of the tween years of a child's development? Back to theology. Back to theology. I want you to, as I share this with you, what our tradition says about what emerges in a young person as they reach the end of their tween years, so 12, 13, in that time frame right there, what's emerging in them? Just at the time that these kids are given increasingly independent access to the internet, just when they're getting access to a phone that gives them access to social media platforms, what's happening inside of them? The first thing is the emergence of the ache. The emergence of the ache. That is that kapax Dei, the fact that we're created not only by God, but for God, for a relationship with God. St. Augustine, you have made us for ourselves and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. When does that emerge? Typically in kids, in this time. They begin to get this sense of restlessness, this ache. I feel empty. That sense of covering that our parents and the immersion we have in our families, my sense of identity, all of that is just naively present. There's a breaking out of the sense of the self, and with it, the ache. Oh, but there's more. There's also the urge, the sexual urge. When these kids reach puberty, the hormones are raging, and emerges within them a sense of being drawn through their own sexual sense of who they are towards the other. Being drawn towards the other. That also happens at the same time. And so that sexual desire, that urge in a fallen human being is bent. It's broken. It'll naturally want to lead towards a sense of sexual pleasure, sexual desire being fulfilled in oneself as I look at and I'm drawn towards the other. And kids don't know how to deal with this. I'm going to flash forward just for a second And this is, again, one of the disgusting and demonic things that happens on the internet, is that kids are made to be drawn towards beauty. Beauty is when there's a harmony among the elements, there's a proportion among the elements that are on display. And so when these kids come onto the internet, they will be drawn towards harmonious, cleverly presented, attractive images that are harmoniously, proportionately displayed. So many young boys are exposed to naked men online and get so confused because of how seductively, cleverly, quote unquote, beautifully it's displayed. It disturbs them because this urge has emerged and they don't know what to do with it. Now all of this stuff is washing over them. But there's more. There's a relational desire that emerges because we're created in the image of God as a communion of persons. That means we're made for relationships, and that shows up as a desire to belong, a desire to be affirmed, and a desire to be in union. I want to belong. I want to be accepted and acceptable. Will you receive me? And I want to have a sense of communion, connection, communication with you. All of this is what emerges in the tween years, in your sons and daughters, your grandsons and granddaughters. This is what's emerging in them. And this is the moment when most parents choose to give them unprotected, unfiltered, unaccompanied access to the internet. What are we doing? What about awareness of ourselves as a parent? We don't parent in a vacuum. How were you parented? How were you mothered and fathered? What assets do you bring from that whole reality of how you were brought up? But what about the wounds you carry? The wounds you carry from your own upbringing. These are things that also show up in how we parent. Where's the manual? And there are things that, how many times do you get surprised? How many times have I gotten surprised as a dad, married 27 years, that all of a sudden I see that I'm parenting, I'm being a father to my kids in a way that was unconsciously imitating my own dad. Oh, and the dynamic that was primarily present between my mom and dad growing up was the one that I was unconsciously bringing into my own parenting. And you know what? Was that marked by strengths or by brokennesses? Yes. So know yourself. Know the things that you bring into this challenging world, this particular issue, by reflecting on what it was like to be parented growing up. All right. How does this impact us as parents? Well, all of this awareness, there's a dynamic with our spouse that shows up in our approach to parenting. Having given these talks now for 10 years, one of the things that often is a pressing issue is what? My spouse doesn't agree with my approach. I want to do it like this. He thinks this is fine. I think this is crazy. She thinks this is okay. That is a really, really hard road to be on when there's a difference regarding this. What about the impact on the digital world? This also impacts our digital world, all of these awarenesses together. And then all together, this impacts how we parent in the digital world. So our relationship in parenting all kinds of other issues, our relationship to the digital world, this is all going to come together. Just regarding awareness. Regarding the digital world. I'm going to give you an issue. Again, it's the issue that most people will talk about. I'm only going to talk about it briefly and not with lots of detail. but I just want to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. What most parents understand about pornography is that it's almost everywhere on the internet. It's pervasive, it's invasive, and it's lucrative. We get that, right? You can read the statistics, how the pornographic industry has billions of websites. It's crazy how many websites there are, and it's making more money than all of the major media conglomerates combined, right? It's so lucrative, this industry on the internet. It's pervasive, it's invasive. We're going to talk more about that. We also probably know that pornography is addictive, progressive, and deadly. It's addictive. One image, boom, gets planted in the memory. If you know spiritual warfare, you know that the devil does what? The devil doesn't have access to your reason, but to your imagination and memory, and will stir up memories and attempt to get them to be moved around in your imagination to cause this shocking picture that this poor kid has come into contact with, to harass them over and over and over. It's also progressive, and we'll talk a little about the progressive nature of pornographic activity on the internet. And by that I mean, it can start with simple things where kids are exposed to immodesty, even animated forms of immodesty. I know that might sound strange. My son, one of my sons a few years ago came to me and said, "Dad, I want to confess to you that I saw an image that was not appropriate on the internet." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he's, "Well, it was on the kids' game page that we had allowed to come through, just playing kids' games. But on the side, there was an ad for a video game, animated, that had a girl that was very busty on it. But it was a cartoon image." He found that disturbing, and he wanted to confess that. We are so desensitized to what it is disturbs our kids' sense of peace. And it's also deadly. Carrie and I, we speak at married couples events, and I've done so for so many years. And when we will pray with couples at the end of the retreat, at the end of our time, what's the number one issue that is just bringing pain and suffering into marriage? He's addicted to pornography. She has a problem with pornography. It's just destructive. Talk to priests. What's the number one thing that they hear in confession? Pornography. It's a problem. The latest statistics, I did a quick refresh. The Barna Institute, Pew Research, did research on this topic. And the number one issue, the percentage of church-going men who self-identify as having a problem with pornography. Okay, did you hear that? All those caveats? Church-going men self-identifying problem with pornography. You want to guess? 70%. I was stunned. 10 years ago, it was 40. What has happened? You think of the people going to church today, they're that much more vigorous, intentional, making a decision, and yet they are struggling. But what don't we understand? If you've been blessed by God's mercy to be protected from this issue, what we don't understand today is what forms it takes. We think it's pictures and videos. No, today it's live video and it's interactive. There's a shift in this issue today from being an observer to being a participant. Did you hear that? From being an observer to a participant. What do I mean? Online, on these sites, there's a way to interact with the ones that are performing these sexual acts. They interact, pay money for actions to happen. And then there's the connecting of the digital world to the real world with all of these apps that are hookup apps. You can geolocate, find out where you are, find a profile, click, and then all of a sudden you can connect. Or, as I've heard from parents, oh, there's chatting. Oh, there's a party happening over there. Oh, why don't you come to the party? We'll send an Uber to pick you up. Parents have no idea. Kids sneak out, get Ubered by the older kids, come to the party, and then we'll Uber you home when we're done with you. This is the world that we're living in. And so there's a social context, the social context of pornography. Yeah, our kids are going to seek it out of curiosity. They're going to wonder, but you don't know what they're encountering. If they do have access to social media platforms, until you just go in and type in the word lesbian, and watch what shows up on Instagram. You'll be shocked. But pornography seeks out your kids. You get this, right? Click here. Oh, hey, connect with me. I got a picture. Click. It's just routine. It's a routine thing for kids that are connected at all, that they're getting all of these things coming at them. How? Well, through their friends in the digital world. But, and here's the key, through their friends in the real world. You're going to hear me say this 7 more times this morning. The best protection for your kids regarding the digital world, apart from you and your home, will be the friends they're hanging around with. And the willingness you have to talk to those parents about their kids' use of technology. All right, what do? Well, we begin with ourselves. Our purity, our modesty will radiate. We have to be aware of desensitization in the media and in the real world around these issues. We can draw upon parenting sources that can support, encourage, and hold us accountable. Covenant Eyes, you've probably heard of. Bark is another one. These are online portals that will help you track every keystroke, track every site that's visited, every activity that's going on. There are resources out there that you can put onto your devices. But you also have to protect yourself and your family. And there are technological solutions for that. Okay, let's talk about protection. Remember now, we started with awareness and we're moving to protection, and then we're going to talk about influence, freedom, and engagement. 3 levels of protection. There's the human level, there's the spiritual level, and then there's the technology level. I am not going to focus as much on the human and spiritual levels, except I want to just ask you a question about what moment we're living in. What moment are we living in? God has planted us in this moment. From a human and spiritual level, looking around at the world in which we live, it's time for a cookout, right? That's part of our lives. It's time for a cookout. You go and, yeah, there's that fire. It's in the barbecue. And let's go and let's have fellowship together. And there are parts of our lives that are like that. And we should be very grateful for that we have a lot of our life like that. But there are other times when there's a burn ban on. Hey, should you be lighting those fires in your backyard? That's going to be dangerous. I'm not sure that you should be doing that. So the fire that you light in that moment, that might go badly for you. And so there are parts of our lives where we have to be on alert that if we take a certain direction, it could be trouble. And then there's another moment, your house is on fire. Get out now. And if I said to you, where do we want to live? We all want to be in the barbecue, right? And in fact, you go back 15 years. 15 years is before the smartphone, before the development of 4G, 5G, before the ease of video streaming on the internet. You go back 15 years, the world wasn't perfect, not by any stretch of the imagination. But for the most part, we could live our lives like a barbecue. As we've gone downstream from there, yeah, there's a burn ban on, there's more that's dangerous, more that we have to be aware of, but your house is on fire. Regarding the digital world, house is on fire. There are kids being slaughtered, destroyed, burned up by what they're accessing and experiencing in the digital world. That's all I'm going to talk about at that level for right now. I'm going to get to the technological level. Technological level in terms of protection in the digital world, there's possession, passwords, parental controls, and provider of internet service. I'm only going to cover these things briefly. I'm going to point you to how you can go deeper yourself, but these are important strategies for use of connected devices in our homes, in our lives as parents. Possession, what does this look like? Well, take the smartphone or connected device into your possession at agreed upon times. Very simple. Where do the phones go at night? Bring them into the bedroom. They come here, right? At night, when they're not in use, on certain days, on Sunday, at specific times, when visitors are here, devices are off, shut down, they don't get used. This is not easy for older kids. For younger kids, easy peasy. As the kids get older, these challenges get harder. And so, how do you implement it is really the key. Well, apply them to social events at your home. Create an expectation. What do I mean by that? So in our home, kids come over. Hey, we're really glad you're here. Phone comes to me. When you're done and you're leaving the home, we'll hand it back to you.
That was just in Seattle.
That was just in Seattle.
You don't have to do that here.
We don't have to do that really much here. So Carrie was laughing because so few of the kids that actually come and hang around with our kids have phones. It's a community answer. It really is. But at social events, kids come over, phones in a basket, we'll give them back to you afterwards. Right? We are not a family that really does sleepovers. But if there are those rare occasions where we do let a sleepover happen, oh, man, it is definitely, everything is locked down and everything is gathered. For a time, one of the ways that Carrie and I, if it was a matter of, you know what, things are really going to be locked down, let's take the modem, let's take the router with us, unplug it from the wall, it goes in the car, and we drive away. You're not laughing. That's possession. That's actually taking possession of the device. Take the device in your hands. True story, my daughter, 18 years old, living in our house, she did not know how to use the smartphone well. We upheld a rule, which was you turn it in at night. She was not happy. That was not a way of saying it. She let us know how, because she had experienced so much of the poison of the internet in her own life. She was vocally, intensely speaking out to us how bad it was. Phone. Gave us the phone. Woke up the next morning, there was a letter under our door to our bedroom. And in part it said, Dad, thank you for loving me enough to not get away with things that you know are not good for me. Thank you for loving me enough to not get away with things that you know are not good for me. That's how we have to pray. Now, a concrete way to do that is contracts. We're going to talk about use of contracts for phones in just a little bit. Before we get there, though, let's talk about passwords. Why? First and easiest technological layer. All your devices ought to have passwords on them. If you're using Amazon for video, you can have a password on it, right? If you're using any kind of Wi-Fi, password on it. Where? Router, computer, desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone, smart TV, game console, if your kids are using video games. And by the way, kids don't need video games. I know they think they do. They don't. My kids have never had an Xbox. We finally surrendered a few years ago and got them what was called a Wii, so they could play Mario Kart. Okay, that's the extent of video games in the current home. And I mean, our kids are 17-year-old boy, 16-year-old boy. They don't need video games. You can put passwords on all of these things. When you're putting together a password, make it memorable but not guessable. Kids will try. Kids will try. and change them occasionally. Change them occasionally. There's actually a little service that you can have all their apps stored online securely, because she'll forget passcodes all the time. And I change mine regularly, and that can be very frustrating, but I can remember it. And so, change your passwords, kids will guess them. Okay, let's talk about parental controls. Parental control software is not a panacea. It's not a one-stop, everything's taken care of. Okay? None of these parental control software programs will say that they're perfect. But what they are and what they do can be super helpful in blocking out certain kinds of content and blocking out categories, content, access times, who's on, what they're visiting, tracking things that are seen. The best is NetNanny, in my humble opinion. I don't get paid for saying that. We've used NetNanny for years. Norton Family often gets recommended as well. It feels like to me NetNanny has continued to grow and advance what they do better than anybody else. That's my recommendation. What devices? You can put NetNanny on your computer, on your tablet, on your smartphone, not on your smart TV, but you can put parental control on smart TVs, on game consoles. You can do that for all of those. I do that. She's my phone right there. On my smartphone, I have an app for Xfinity. Right? It controls it. Controls who is on the Wi-Fi. I can shut down. I can put parental controls. I can put time limits. I can put access limits, all on my phone. All these things are doable. On your smartphone, if you have an iPhone, learn about screen time. Get to know it and use it. I can't tell you how sick inside some parents have been when I said, in your smartphone, go to settings, scroll down to screen time, click on screen time. You can set everything from how long, what, who, and not only that, but what do they get to do? Do they get to install apps, delete apps? What are the different constraints and limitations around web content, and what kind of video they can stream, and what kind of movies and TV shows they can watch, what kind of music? They have no idea. And they've handed their kid a phone with none of those restrictions on there. I'm like, this is not that difficult. And you can put a password on it so that they can't change what is accessed on that phone. Now, kids are smart. What do kids do? Force reset, swipe everything, start all over again. Well, that's where the contract comes in. That's where we have to go to the next level. There's an overarching layer. The means of accessing the internet itself. You can restrict the use of apps, bandwidth, downtime, all of that stuff. I already mentioned the Xfinity app. Those are all very practical things that you can do at these different layers. Now, if we could do it all over again, when and why would we give them a smartphone? And the answer is, we would not have given our 8th grader a smartphone. No way. As our kids got a bit older, we did give a sophomore and freshman in high school a lockdown smartphone because they were the only ones in their Catholic high school as a sophomore and a freshman that didn't have phones. It was the social pressure more than what they needed. It was the social pressure. God bless us. Now, if you're going to do it, what phone? Well, our kids used iPod Touches. Not iPhones. iPod Touch. iPod Touch is Wi-Fi only. You can lock it down. And you know what? It's not upgradable to everything. There are certain more modern applications that you can't even download onto them. It's totally fine. I know you're saying, well, what does your kid do when they're out with friends and they can't call you? Well, guess what? Everyone else has a phone. There might have been 2 times in the history of the Curran kids' lives where they needed a phone and couldn't access one. I'm okay with that. But there will come a time when your kids, if you're going to navigate this world, rather than just say, no, don't, you're going to have to put a phone in their hands. Well, thanks be to God, that's one of the things that has advanced in the last several years, are alternative phones that provide better protection and essential functions that are valuable on a smartphone in a kid's hands. There are some, Wise Phone you might have heard of, Gap Phone, Pinwheel, a new one, Light Phone. I've never heard of Light Phone, but when I was doing research, I stumbled into that one. But when we did our research, we ended up with a Trumi phone. Trumi. Trumi is a Samsung phone, so it's an actual Samsung 5G phone. And it allows the basic things that I want for my kids. Make a phone call, you can text. You have GPS navigation. That's key. I don't want my kid getting lost. And unfortunately, that's where some of these other phones fall down. They don't have sufficiently mature app around the GPS. And so the Trumi phone does have Google Map locked in. So it does allow you to get your kid into a reliable map network. Now, it also has an amazing online parent portal where you can choose to see, if you want, you can choose to see every phone call, every text, every picture, anything that's shared. And it's very reasonably priced because they don't do video. They don't have so much data being streamed. And it also allows for a small number of apps. If you choose that level of service, it's something that can be grown into, a small number of apps that will allow your child to grow in their use of the internet. They have a safe browser. They have access to Spotify. They have access to a couple of other apps, and they're continuing to evaluate apps that are going to fall within the safe category. So I have found that Trumi was the best alternative to a solid phone that's going to give you a solid network and at the right time, give my kid who's now driving a phone where I can be in touch with him and know where he's going to be. So. In terms of contracts, I'm going to pause there because contracts is a bigger conversation, and it's going to take us a little bit to get through contracts. Then we can move in there into the next theme.